I would like to see CrossFit make an attempt to get outside their bubble. We usually spend the majority of our time speaking to people who are already involved. They need to get outside that group. They need to start talking to the people who don't know about CrossFit, whether it's in, magazines or television programs or podcasts, but really doing a better job of letting the everyday person know about the affiliate experience, about how CrossFit is scalable, about how, you don't have to be some super fit Spartan to walk inside of a gym, how, even if you do have some limitations, you can still train, you can still work out, you can still improve your health, because most of the time we're just telling each other that. So I think that's the biggest thing for them. Find a way to get outside that bubble. And I think Eric is serious about that. I think they have like a director of marketing now. They're looking at this, and it's going to be a slow process, but my hope is that you'll start to see that develop more here in the coming months as we get into 2022.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Invictus Mindset Podcast. Today's guest is a CrossFit broadcaster and the co-host of the Talking Elite Fitness podcast. He's been broadcasting for more than 20 years in both television and radio. He's most famously known as one of the faces and the broadcasters of the CrossFit Games, Mr. Sean Woodland. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the hype session there at the beginning. That was nice. Thanks.
It's well-deserved, man. You make a ton of time for connecting with people and sharing your insight within the CrossFit space. And I'm just so thankful to connect with you and, kind of share your story today.
That's my pleasure to be here. I really appreciate you asking me on.
Before we dive into your story, man, it's cool because you have this incredible voice. It's a voice that's become very familiar to people like me within the CrossFit space. You've shared a lot of different knowledge and insight on so many different platforms. And unfortunately, yesterday, we just lost John Madden.
Yeah.
And his voice was a voice that was very famous within the NFL and the National Football League. Was he somebody that meant a lot to you? And, what was the first thing that kind of popped in your brain when you found out that we lost Mr. Madden?
Yeah, I was like, I think a lot of people in this field, he was a huge influence on me growing up. And I was, devastated by it, because just this past weekend, there was the documentary on him that I think it was on Fox Sports ran it. I unfortunately didn't get a chance to see it, and I really wanted to watch it. I saw about 2 minutes of it in between doing things. But John Madden and Pat Summerall, for me growing up, in the 80s and watching NFL as much as I did, they were kind of the soundtrack of that sport for me. If you heard Pat Summerall and John Madden, you knew this was a big game. And I think that John Madden was probably the first guy who, there were others before him who did that color commentator role with a little bit of, I don't know if flair is the right word, but he really made that his thing. Like he was the standard. He brought an element of entertainment to it that I don't think people in the past had brought. He was always very personable. He always, I think, talked to the audience like they were his friends. And I think for a lot of kids too, who maybe didn't grow up watching him, his voice was the soundtrack that of the Madden football games that they grew up playing, that maybe helped them, fall in love with the game. And he will be missed. And I think that everybody now who does that job of color commentator, whether they know it or not, are doing some things that probably John Madden pioneered. And it's just it's super unfortunate. You're getting old when people that you grew up with who are the soundtrack to your football experience. Now, both Pat Summerall and John Madden have passed on, and they will be missed. They both left an indelible mark on not only the sport of football, but also broadcasting.
Yeah, for sure. There's so much familiarity with their voice and comfort. And like you said, excitement around, those guys are color commentating. This is a really, really big game.
Yeah.
Kind of in the likes of, in the 90s, if you and I self-reflect a little bit and you think about the growth and development of SportsCenter at the time, you and I, one of the first names that comes to mind is Dan Patrick and Stuart Scott.
Yep.
What did those guys kind of mean to you, and how did they kind of help foster your skill set?
It's funny because you bring that up, because those guys were really doing their thing, and were really kind of pioneering a different style of sportscasting when I was in college and I started getting into this. It was Olbermann, it was Patrick, it was Kenny Mayne, Stuart Scott, Charlie Steiner. And it was at that time in the mid 90s, like SportsCenter was appointment television. You showed up to watch that because you wanted to see what those guys were going to say. You wanted to watch all the highlights. You wanted to be, educated and entertained. And they really brought that entertainment side to it. For those of us that were trying to sort of break into the sportscasting business, when you're that age, and it's kind of the same thing if you're ever in a band. If you start a band, all you do is you kind of imitate what you know. So you probably just play songs that sound like your favorite bands. So we, in my sportscasting class at San Francisco State, the majority of us were just trying to imitate those guys. That was the standard. So let's try to be funny and be entertaining. And, that is very hard to do. They made it very easy because it looked very easy because they were all so good at it and had their own styles. But, when you're some, 20-something kid, it doesn't come that easy. We entertained ourselves a little bit, but they kind of helped us find our own voices by imitating them to get started. And then as we sort of got more comfortable, then we sort of developed our own style out of that. I guess it's like a crutch to get our careers going.
I love that, man. I mean, without further ado, you're one of those people for me getting into the CrossFit space. Like, I've emulated you and Tommy Marquez and, and Joe Rogan, obviously, and some of these people within the space. And so, it should feel pretty good on your end knowing that, you've kind of moved into that role for some of the younger podcasting, people like myself. I also want to make sure we mention briefly the late Chick Hearn as well. He was another one within the space that had some really cool sayings. And you talk about being funny and using metaphors and analogies. At the end of the game when the Lakers were winning, the butter's getting hard and the jello's jiggling, like some of those funny little things that he used to say. Like, what was Chick Hearn's role in your, up and coming development?
I wasn't a huge basketball fan growing up, and when I did get into basketball, it was when the Sacramento Kings moved to Sacramento. I grew up in Sacramento, and they moved to Sacramento, I think in 1985 is when they showed up. So I've always.
Were you a Chris Webber and a Vlade Divac fan?
When they played, absolutely. And I sort of have a hatred for the Lakers because of that, because they had that big rivalry in the early 2000s, and which is funny because Tommy is a huge Lakers fan, and I just try not to think about that. But I didn't watch a ton of basketball or listen to a ton of basketball, but you knew who Chick Hearn was. You knew the voice, you knew his style, and you knew that there will never be another one of these guys. Vin Scully is in the same boat. What he did as the voice of the Dodgers, that will never be duplicated. There will be plenty of talented people who will call those games. And I'm not sure who the guy's doing it, the name of the guy who took over for him. He's great, but there will never be another Vin. It's the guys like Vin Scully and John Madden and Chick Hearn are people who carved out a niche for themselves. They owned it, and no one ever will be able to do it as well as they did.
It's such a cool thing to think about because you look at this concept of storytelling, and a lot of us replay the images that we see with the internal dialogue of some of these color commentators. Yeah. And so it ends up playing such a huge role as to, how they deliver the information, the energy, the enthusiasm, the presence, and how that replays within the narratives that we carry between our ears. It's very cool to kind of go down memory lane and see how a lot of these innovators have played roles in the modern day craft and the continual evolution within the technology and information delivery space. You mentioned briefly getting into, this media landscape kind of within the college time. How did you ultimately find commentating, and ultimately trickle your way into some of these cool sports like the NFL, college football, the PGA Tour, NASCAR, and some of these other cool places that you've involved yourself in? I
kind of got into it by accident. I was going to San Francisco State as a film major and really quickly discovered that I was not, I don't want to say cut out for it, but I just did not fit in with the crowd that was there. I was really approaching it as I wanted to know about the business of making movies. You know, I wanted to get a job. I wasn't concerned about being an artist, quote unquote. I wanted to write movies, make movies. I was really interested in it. But then I realized that, I don't fit in here. This is going to be miserable for me. This is not something that I really want to pursue. And I started looking through the class list at San Francisco State. I was flipping through the catalog, I guess you'd call it. And there was a sportscasting class. And I was thinking, okay, I love NFL films. I love, editing videos. I love making videos. So maybe that'd be something I could look into. And I'm still looking at it as something from behind the camera. So I signed up for the class, switched my major to broadcasting because I thought that would be a little more along the lines of what I wanted to do because I love sports. And got into the sportscasting class there. And this, at the time I was going there, so like 94, 95, 96 was when I was there. Obviously before the internet blew up, we had a public access cable station that was dedicated to our sports. We were a Division II school, so we didn't have any TV deal. So we had public access cable that we would be able to broadcast our own game. So anything that we did that San Francisco State put out as far as like basketball or baseball or soccer, volleyball, our sportscasting class did. So that was pretty cool. So I thought, oh, great, I can learn how to shoot sports. I can get involved with this. And so what was cool about the class is you could do any job. You could direct, you could produce, you could do audio, you could do graphics, you could do play-by-play in color. You could do sideline reporting. They put me on camera to do some studio stuff, and I really liked it. And the professor said, hey, you were really good. You should try this for our next broadcast. And that's kind of where it started. And then I got out of San Francisco State, and I just started sending resume tapes out. This was back in the day, again, before the internet. You had to make like VHS copies of your resume reel, and you just mailed them out. And I got a job at a small station in Kalispell, Montana, which is like northwest corner of the state, up in, I think like 80, 90 miles from Canada, right by Glacier National Park. So worked there for a year and a half as their sports anchor, and covered nothing but high school sports and just some local stuff. Did that for a year and a half, then got a job in Tallahassee, Florida as the main sports anchor at the ABC affiliate there, WTXL. Worked there for 2 years. And then I got what I would consider kind of my break, which is when I got the weekend / sports reporter job in Jacksonville, Florida at WJXT. They were a CBS affiliate at the time. Now they're independent, but that's where I got to cover, the National Football League. Had been covering college football, but got to cover the PGA Tour, minor league baseball, NASCAR. They did the Daytona 500, an hour right down the street. And the NCAA tournament. So really got some great opportunities out of that. And I think that is where I really learned how to, I don't want to say, I had a lot of things I had learned about being a professional, and that's kind of where I learned it. The guy who was there had been there forever. He's not there anymore. He doesn't work there anymore. His name is Sam Gavaris. Really is the guy who gave me a lot of tools to move on to the next level.
I love going down, like just kind of seeing the steps that you took in order to get to where you are now, because it's obviously very clear that you have a lot of reps. You've got a lot of practice. And, when you were, practicing, I guess, at the high school level and then slowly transitioning and, upgrading, I guess you could say, what was it like when you finally were able to get that break and kind of take the leap to the professional side of things? Were you anxious? Were you nervous? Were you practicing in front of the camera, in front of the mirror? Were all your friends and family like tired of listening to you practice? Like, what did that look like?
My mom says as a kid, and I don't remember this, that I used to like call football games with the sound down. And I don't remember doing that, but I don't know why she would lie about that. It's funny, Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters had a great line about being, overnight success, and how it's, it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. And how, like, if you want to be in a band, it's not about going on, America's Got Talent or something like that, and all of a sudden getting your break. It's like getting into your garage and being together with your friends and just sucking. And you just suck together. And then
Master of the mundane.
Right. You just suck, and then you just get your reps. And I think that my first 4 years, I think I was just making all kinds of mistakes and just learning to get comfortable in front of the camera. And there weren't a lot of people to teach me what to do. It was a lot of just kind of trial and error and figuring things out. And when I got to Jacksonville, that is when I finally had someone who I would consider was a pro and could show me what to do. And that's, I'm really thankful for that, because Sam taught me a lot about being a professional, about what it takes to present a story, about how you're supposed to sort of present yourself on camera, things you can do to make stories more clear, language you can use, just the way that he conducted himself in interviews, questions, things like that. And I still have a lot to learn, but getting to Jacksonville, I was nervous. I was like, I'm going to cover the NFL. This is gonna be awesome. Like, I don't know what to do. I was nervous. But I was also confident that I had gotten to to use your terminology, enough reps that I could fit in. And I think too, that regardless of what profession you're in, as long as you're willing to work hard and listen to people who know more than you, you're going to be fine. And I showed up in Jacksonville in 2000 when I got that job, very willing to do whatever it took and to listen to people who knew more than me and just keep my head down, shut up, and do my job. And I think that afforded me an opportunity to grow there. And I spent I spent almost 9 years at that station, 10 years. So it was a good time.
That's very cool. I think it's great too. I think all of us have mentors along the way that play such inspiring and incredible roles, which we may not always know it in that exact moment, but then all of a sudden when we look back on the story, we're like, man, that person really helped foster and formulate where I am now. And I think it's always cool to mention those people. I also think it's interesting, your vulnerability around saying like, hey, I sucked. And then I practiced and I sucked a little bit less.
Yeah.
And there's so many correlations there to CrossFit, I think, to draw a little bit of a segue. And I also think it's interesting how you started early on with, you said you could really do any job. And you developed the skills to be a sideline reporter, a broadcaster, a color commentator, editing, producing, directing. You got to involve yourself in so many different things until you ultimately kind of found your niche. I think that's really important, because then you have a general understanding of the whole production, but then you also have tremendous respect and humility for the mastering of each one of those individual crafts. You can kind of speak the language to, create processes and procedures for, being the leader of the show as you are now. And I don't know, I just think it's really cool to acknowledge those things, because it's not like you just one day woke up and you were like, this is my thing, I'm going to be awesome now. You put in the reps, you became a master of the mundane. And then more importantly, the huge thread that I want to pull from your story is the courage and the willingness to learn, being a sponge, not going in saying, oh, I've seen this, 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 and this, and I'm a know-it-all, I'm just going to say everything. It's like, no, just shut up and listen. And I think you did a great job of that. And, ultimately this led to a personal connection to the sport of CrossFit, but also the training regimen associated with CrossFit. Would you mind kind of sharing how you bridged your life as this amazing broadcaster for the NFL and some of these big time sports to ultimately find functional fitness?
Yeah, I was living in Jacksonville at the time, and this was 2007 is when I started CrossFit. So I was working at this station, WJXT, and one of our producers / photographers in the sports department was married to a woman who is a personal trainer. And she had just started using CrossFit, didn't have a level 1, anything like that, but had started using it to train her clients, elements of it, like Olympic lifting and doing some of the name workouts and, stuff for time and teaching the movements. She's very, very proficient in teaching you how to do the movements. And my friend, this guy, Matt, told me, he goes, you should check out this thing called CrossFit. I was like, oh, I don't know. Okay, cool. What is it? He goes, well, you go to a website and they just post a workout and then you do that workout for the day and then that's it. I went, okay, I'm looking for something different, because I was the typical, like I think everybody is before they get into CrossFit, go into the Globo gym and Monday is, chest, and Tuesday's back and buys, and Wednesday's this. And, that was my routine. And I played hockey and that was like my cardio. I looked at the website, I kind of went, and the workout I saw may have been something like, I don't know, 5 sets of 5 shoulder press. Maybe that's what it was. It didn't jump out at me. I went, that doesn't look too hard. Why would I do that? And I kind of blew it off. And then I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, I need to try something different. So I signed up for some personal training sessions with my friend's wife, and she I'd never learned how to squat, taught me how to squat, taught me how to do a really basic kipping pull up because I'd never done that. I had to learn a whole bunch of skills. And the first named workout that I ever did, she just had me do 10 rounds for time of Cindy. That was it. And I almost died. And I was like, okay, this is a new level of working out that I just threw myself into it after that. Cause I realized like I am not in good shape. There is a lot of untapped potential here. Like I can get a lot more out of my body. And I just, like most people when they get into it, I just threw myself into it. I was on all these websites. I was watching videos. I was trying to learn as much as I could. And I was addicted to it and I loved it. And I saw an immediate change in, my appearance. I started eating better. I got out of broadcasting temporarily in 2009 when, the economy had tanked at that point. And I had been at this TV station for, good 8-9 years, and they were paying me more than they wanted to pay that position just by virtue of the fact that I had been there so long. So they, decided not to renew my contract. I got into PR and marketing, a company in Jacksonville that I worked for. That gave me an opportunity to move back to California to be closer to home. Because my dad was dealing with some health stuff at the time, and I wanted to be closer to that. So I was working in Sacramento for another marketing company, and that's how I got into the CrossFit broadcasting. I was still doing CrossFit. I was still doing some freelance stuff every now and then. But then I just fell into the opportunity to do some stuff with CrossFit. It was sort of right place, right time, and it all worked out.
That's very cool, man. I also think, CrossFit is such a community-based, philosophy, such a community-based organization. And at a time where the economy is kind of, moving in a different direction, you've been at a place for, almost 10 years. And you're kind of in limbo land of like, what's next? Mm-hmm. And CrossFit kind of brought you in, and then you were, full of enthusiasm and ready to, kind of take the CrossFit media landscape to the next level. Cause at that time, it was still kind of up and coming. We mm-hmm. saw, the legends like, the Fronings, the Chris Clevers, the Annie Sakamotos, the Bill Grundlers, mm-hmm. who you kind of work with a little bit now. Creating a little bit of spark and a little bit of noise within the space. And there wasn't really a ton of media around it yet. And how did you kind of find your way into that space to be, to bring it full circle, in my humble opinion, the John Madden of CrossFit?
So I'll tell you how I got into it first, it's a funny story. I was getting at the time, I was working out. This is 2012. So I was working out at a gym in Fair Oaks, California, which is right where I grew up, right outside of Sacramento. The owner was a guy by the name of Jake Neubauer. And he said, "Hey man, do you want to coach?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Well, there's an L1 going on up in Reno. I'll pay for half if you want. And then you can pay for the other half. And then you can coach and work out here for free." I said, "That sounds like a great deal. I'll do that." Went to the L1 in Reno. And this is February of 2012. Pat Sherwood, who at the time was one of the people who was on the Update Show with Rory McKernan and Miranda Oldroyd, was one of the mm-hmm. instructors. And during one of the breaks, I decided that I should go up and talk to Pat. Introduced myself, said hi, told him kind of what my background was, wanted to know if there was any way to get involved and how I should do that. And he said, "Yeah, here, send me your info and I'll forward it along." And I thought at the time he was, I don't want to say blowing me off, but he was like, yeah, just send me whatever. I'll take care of it. And I have to, go back to the 2011 games. I was there as a fan. And after I saw all the stuff that ESPN was doing there, I was like, I got to find a way to get involved in this. So I had shot off a random email to media@crossfit.com, just explaining who I was. Never heard back. So that 2012 now with Pat was my second attempt to try to get my foot into the door. And to Pat's credit, he did forward my stuff on. Like I emailed him. He said, "Thanks. I sent it. I'll pass it along." And I just kind of waited. Didn't hear anything until, I think it was April of 2012. It was right before regionals were going to start. CrossFit was going to be on ESPN that year. Recorded, I think. They were going to do some recorded stuff, or at least, no, they were going to be on ESPN 3, which was at the time was like the online ESPN thing that you could watch, you could stream live. So as a warm-up, what they were going to do to get ready for this is they were going to go to the Central East Regional, because that had Froning and all those heavy hitters that were coming out of there. And they were going to do that as a test run. And they were looking for just anybody that they could try out for the broadcast. So I was sitting in my office at my my 9-to-5 job, and my cell phone rang, and it was a number from Las Vegas. Had no idea who it was. Picked it up, and it was Rory McKernan. So I immediately made like a beeline out the door. I'm like, I got to take this call. Head out the door, and Rory, introduced himself and said, "Hey man, you've been on our radar for a while. I got your email here that you sent from to media at CrossFit.com." So that was back in August. And Pat Sherwood told me about you. He goes, "We're trying to put together a group of people to go and broadcast the Central East Regional live, and would you be interested in doing it?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I'll be interested in doing it." He goes, "Okay, would you be able to do play-by-play for the women's competition?" I'm like, "Absolutely. Don't care. Play-by-play for the women's competition sounds great." So did that. And, that was kind of the start of it. They said, "Okay, we want you to do the games." And then I did some like part-time stuff for them. Helping out with the regional recap videos. I, did, some producing for the update show. And it was sort of the same situation. I came in there knowing that these guys have no clue what they're doing right now, but I'm not going to say anything because I'm just going to shut up and just do my job until they ask me what I think. And that's how I got involved with it. And
that's so cool. Yeah, Pat Sherwood's such a staple within the space too.
Yeah, he's awesome.
A guy that just brings up such valid points, very articulate. Rory McKernan, a guy that's a master of his craft and doing some really cool things with CrossFit Mayhem now. Yeah,
that's been good for him to get involved in.
Miranda, I had her husband and business partner, Julian Alcaraz, on the show earlier this year to talk about street parking a little bit. Yeah. And so it's cool to hear all these names kind of in the same conversation.
It's funny how many people, like I was thinking about it the other day because Chase Ingram was on a podcast talking about that whole 2012 Central East experience. And that's, if you could put a pin in the time where the modern sort of CrossFit media landscape started, it would be right there, because there were so many people that they brought in. I mean, they had all kinds of play-by-play people they were just trying out. It's like, you try this. And they actually had a production crew that had experience with other sports that brought a level of professionalism that I think was lacking. And these guys still work in the space. Mike Roth, who's one of the directors he's always directing live stuff. Sorry, I just got a message I had to read. And then Eric Barnhart as one of the producers, and all the camera guys that are still part of it. That's really the first time it all came together. It's sort of interesting looking back on that, but that's where it was born, I think.
When you talked about kind of seeing the processes and procedures that they had in place, you kind of being the new guy and not really wanting to create too much chaos right away, what was their system like? And ultimately, how did you kind of create a little bit of positive change for the organization and the structure of production?
So I think Tony Budding said that what was it? He said it was something about how, for not knowing what we were doing, we succeeded based on just, effort. And that was it. Like, it was very clear. Like, they had no idea about how to sort of put a show together. They had no clue about what different roles were supposed to be. They didn't know, basic things like just show structure and things like that. Where you use video, where you use, what graphics to support things. It was just, they just succeeded by sheer will alone. But they did know the sport. And that was what was super important for Tony at the time, Tony Budding, who the guy is kind of the father of the media department. Who moved on, I think, in 2014. But he wanted people who knew CrossFit because they had to be able to talk to the community. So I looked at that and go, okay, I'm just going to come in. I'm just going to do my thing. And when someone asks me, I will give them an opinion. But other than that, I'm going to do it their way until they don't want to. And I got an opportunity to kind of help produce the update show. And I think that was the first time where I brought in, like, okay, this is how it's done elsewhere. These are some of the things that we need to start doing and thinking about. And it was a slow process because there were people who were very set in their ways and didn't really want to change. And it was like, no, that's not how we do it in CrossFit. And I'm like, well, if you want to make a good show, that's kind of how you have to do it. And slowly but surely, I think that's kind of how I started to affect some change. And then another guy by the name of Charlie Doobie, who is still involved. He's with Hamilton Road Productions, the company that now does a lot of CrossFit's media. Once he came on board, then there was another person who had been involved in, he had experience with ESPN. So he knew some of the best practices. And then we got more people in who just understood like what broadcasting was all about, like Tommy. Like he had watched plenty of stuff, so he knew like what the jobs were all about. And so we finally started to get like a group of people together who understood, okay, this is what sports broadcasting needs to look like, and this is how we apply it to CrossFit.
Yeah, I think you guys have done a really good job just seeing the systems, being involved in other systems, gradually kind of sharing ideas in a very suggestive way versus like, this is the only way. And then seeing how it's developed over time. Like, I love watching you guys. I love listening to you guys without having like a personal relationship with you before today. I feel like I know you. And I also want to share with our audience, to make it come full circle a little bit, how you sent that email originally trying to get your foot in the door. Then you kind of briefly had a conversation with Pat Sherwood. I was able to cross paths with you just briefly at the Legends competition a couple weeks ago, and just kind of mentioned like, hey man, I love what you're doing. I know you're super busy, broadcasting right now, but just wanted to let you know I'd love to have you on the show. Not really thinking too much of it. Wasn't sure if you were like actually interested, but you were like, yeah, I'd love to. And then here we are having a conversation. And so sometimes just to share with people, it's overcoming that resistance. It's just having a gentle conversation and seeing if people are interested, and then having the courage and the bravery to try to have some actionables that follow those conversations.
Yeah, what was it Wayne Gretzky said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's hard. Like, I get it. It's like, it's hard to step out of your comfort zone and ask people some things, because no one ever wants to be told no or be rejected or anything like that. But, you realize that at a certain point in your life, it's like, well, fine, they say no, who cares? We'll go to the next thing,
Yeah.
And it's why
I also think it's really cool that Dave Grohl thing that you mentioned, like just get in the garage and just get the reps.
And that's the thing.
I think that's such a cool analogy for people.
No one ever starts out good at anything, and like I said, you just like start doing something. You're going to suck at first, but then you're going to suck a little less the next day, and then a little less the next day. And then all of a sudden you'll be good. And then you'll find something else that you need to work on. It's never a, okay, well now I'm done. Now I'm good at everything. It's always, and I think that's what's cool about CrossFit, is that there's always something you can improve.
I think that's rad, man. It's that concept of chop wood, carry water. We move on, but we always have to take the lessons from before. How did you ultimately meet Tommy Marquez?
And how did I meet Tommy Marquez?
Yeah, how did you ultimately meet that guy?
Right. It's funny. So I don't think I've told this story before, and he's sitting right here to my left. The first time I remember Tommy was we had a media summit in San Francisco, and this was like everybody that was involved in producing any type of content for CrossFit all got together at a hotel in San Francisco, and we had this big conference. Tony Budding spoke. Greg was there. It was this big deal about how we're a media company and we publish every day, and these are the things we want to do. And one morning it was a group workout, and I think it was like dumbbell thrusters and box jumps, and they divided us up into teams, and and Tommy was on my team, and I remember thinking, man, this guy's pretty tall. I don't know how he's going to move these things so fast. And then he got on the dumbbell thrusters and went, dang, that dude's fit. So that was the first time I met Tommy. And then I met him a little bit during regionals the next year, I think it was, just being around the office. And yeah, that's kind of how we met. And it was very clear. It was funny. For the longest time, it was clear, this guy knew the sport. He knew what he was talking about. He knew the history. He was always pitching ideas during meetings. And Charlie Doobie and I, the guy I mentioned earlier, they brought Charlie in to kind of be the producer so I could focus more on being on camera doing stuff. So Charlie was producing shows, and he and I would collaborate a lot. And we're like, we got to get Tommy involved in this. He's really good. We got to get him on. And finally got the opportunity to do it. And it was, it was like, oh yeah, it was. And that's it's unfair, because I tell people all the time, Tommy's good at everything. He's just is good at everything. And I mentioned that being up there and sucking, it's like, he got right up there and it's like, God, he's good right away. This isn't fair. And he was just really good at it. And it was cool. He was a natural. And that was the first time that I felt that we had somebody in that role of an analyst who really got what it was about, because he was a fan of other sports. He'd watch other sports broadcasting. So he knew, okay, this is my job. This is my role. And I think that was getting him involved was really a big step. Not that there's no offense to anybody else who was doing the job, but then we got, Tommy and Pat together, and that was fantastic. And then we would bring in, Andy Sakamoto and people like that. But I think Tommy really put the blueprint down of this is how you do the job. And then it allowed other people to excel.
Yeah, he's got a very infectious personality, and I'm a big fan just being 6'4" myself. Let him know that he's on Team Too Tall, and we got to have him on the show too.
Team Too Tall. Oh, yeah. I know he'd love to come on.
Team Long Femur, man. It's subtly a little bit challenging within the sport of CrossFit, but somehow certain people find ways to do it.
Yeah.
When you look at the Spencer Hendels, the Asia Bartos, the Fikowskis, it's very, very cool. You guys have such a great synergy about you, but right around 2020, there was a little bit of a hiccup within the media landscape of CrossFit Inc. And, at that time, there were the very controversial Greg Glassman comments. There was some chaos around the Black Lives Matter movement. And all of a sudden, we saw this weird explosion within functional fitness. And everybody wasn't really sure what was going on. People were de-affiliating. People were trying to figure out what's to come next. What was going on within your headspace at the time? And what were some of your thoughts with regards to some of the comments that were made?
Yeah, I remember that time. And when all that stuff started, it was rough waters anyway. We didn't know what the sport was going to be like because of everything that was going on with the sanction events and, what were the games going to be like? Because we were coming off, the 2019 year that seemed a little strange to everybody, the way the cuts happened. And I remember once all that hit the fan, it was, at least I was thinking, and I think Tommy was probably in the same boat. It's like, are we even going to have a sport? Like, is this even going to survive? And if it doesn't, what will take its place? And will we have a spot in that? And as far as just the comments from Greg, I think a lot of people talk about, and there's some people who say, it's cancel culture, it's this and that. And I would disagree with that. Because I think that it started with that letter that he wrote to the affiliate, that one affiliate, I think up in Seattle, is like Rocket CrossFit or something, that came out. And you're like, wow, how can you say that to somebody? Why would you treat someone like that? What was the point of that? And then you had the recorded remarks that came out where he had the call with the affiliates. And then you had the tweet. And so you had all this stuff that was just more than one thing. And I think people looked at the behavior and they said, I don't want to be a part of this. This doesn't represent who I am. And I know that there were some people who were caught in the middle who didn't want to de-affiliate. And I respect that because I know they said, I don't want to take CrossFit off my building's name because I put equity into this. This is more than Greg. This is what I have built. I want to save this. I don't want to just cut ties. So everybody dealt with that in their own way. But I don't think people who called cancel culture on that, I think it was more of accountability. I think people looked at the totality of some things that happened and said, we don't want to be involved with this person anymore. It was more than just one little instance that was taken out of context and then people assumed the worst. There were some, it was hard to not reach the conclusion that this is not something that we want to be attached to. And for us, it was okay, what do we do now? How do are we even going to have a sport? What are we going to talk about? And we started, we had to address a lot of it on our show. And that's not what we started or what we wanted to do when we first, started the podcast. We wanted to cover the sport, talk about stuff we love talking about. And it was a really tumultuous time, and just not knowing if, we were even going to have CrossFit gyms anymore, because I think we both agreed that there was no way Greg was going to sell. He was going to white knuckle this thing to the end. And, what came next? Were we going to have to find new jobs? Was this whole thing going to die? So it was a scary time. And because a lot of people were going through a lot of stuff too. You had the pandemic, you had everything like you just addressed, but it was, I'm glad it worked out the way it did, but it was not fun going through that at all. And I'm sure affiliates were feeling the same way. It's how do I get people in the door when this is the only publicity we're getting on any sort of national media? How do I keep this name from being toxic? And I still respect the people who decided to keep the name on the gym and try to fight from within to make it better. And I know, and I understand totally why people decided to take the name off.
I think you did a really good job describing that. It's such a unique topic to discuss because we all have to be so careful with our words, especially within, this landscape of, traditionally long form allows for seeking to understand and total context. But sometimes within this broadcasting space, people will pull snippets and, say, oh, Sean Woodland said this. And, it makes it very challenging to have healthy conversations around controversial topics that can be volatile and politicized and, twisted and turned so many ways. So I appreciate you addressing that. At that time, though, there was a lot of volatility, but also what came next, which we didn't really anticipate, was a lot of innovation. You guys got more popular with Talking Elite Fitness. We saw the growth and development of the Buttery Bros. Morning Chalk Up started to kind of blow up a little bit. And all of a sudden, we started to see some of this functional fitness media coming from all of these very unique and innovative angles. What was that journey kind of like for you and Tommy? And, what was your, observed perception of it all?
So going back to 2018, when the plug got pulled, there were a lot of things going on that we didn't, that we thought that might help rescue the sport. So at the time, back in 2018, when Greg decided to get rid of the media department, IMG, who owns the UFC, they were in negotiations to try to take over the production side and the broadcast side of the CrossFit Games and its season. So they were speaking to me, they were talking to Tommy about bringing us on board with this. And this was around like October 2018 when we were having these conversations. And we thought, okay, let's do something to where we can stay involved in the space so that when this deal does happen, we're still relevant and that IMG is interested in bringing us on and we can just, go do what we can do for them and everything will be fine. So that's kind of why the podcast, that was like the original reason we started the podcast. Plus we just wanted to continue to talk about the sport. We never thought it would get to the point where it is now, which is it's a great problem to have. But it was just a way for us to, let's just stay involved and stay relevant so that when this deal does happen, that will be okay. And they, they would call us, the people from IMG would call me, they'd call Tommy, be like, hey, the deal is almost done. Like we just got to dot some I's and cross some T's and lawyers got to figure a couple things out, but this is going to happen. And here's what we're interested in doing. And I was having these conversations, into March of 2019. And then finally the deal fell through and then bam, nothing. So it was like, all right, we're on our own. Let's figure this out. So we kept doing the podcast. We still had opportunities to do some sanction events, still had the opportunity to do the games. Tommy was doing his stuff for Morning Chalk Up. And I think when Greg and company looked at what they wanted to do with media in 2018, they didn't take into account the maturity of the media space. I think they thought that the infrastructure and the media that they were going to rely on to sort of get their message out was more mature than it was, and it wasn't. Now it probably is, and everything that that you just summarized, it's like our podcast is growing. Morning Chalk Up is now a place where people go on a daily basis to get information. People love watching the Buttery Bros, so that content is still out there, but it's had to grow a little bit. And now there is a much more robust and healthy media landscape out there to tell the stories that now CrossFit is trying to tell again, and Tommy and I are lucky enough to be involved with that. It's a healthier space, but it had to go through some real serious growing pains. And out of the ashes of what happened in 2018, I think we've gotten some pretty cool stuff. It just took a while, and it was I wish that would have been there when this did happen in 2018, because maybe the sport wouldn't have dipped as much as it did in those next 2 years.
I think that's a cool summary of it. As you were going through all of that, what's kind of going through the mind of Sean Woodland? You've got a family, you've got responsibilities, you've got bills to pay. You're managing the uncertainty, the fear, everything associated with the pandemic as well, trying to find ways to sneak in your fitness to take care of your physical, mental, and emotional and spiritual health as well. How are you managing all of this chaos while simultaneously trying to stay perky and up with your energy in front of the camera where there's all this expectation of who you're supposed to be?
Yeah, it was tough. I'm lucky that I'm surrounded by good people. When everything happened in 2018, I was, to your point, I got bills to pay. I got a family to support. I was like, okay, I got to go find a job. And my wife said to me, she goes, I don't want you to, don't go do something that you're going to hate. I don't want to see you do that. She goes, give this podcast thing a chance. Give your freelance stuff a chance. Try to build that up. We're going to be okay. She's very lucky to have a good job here in San Jose. She goes, we're going to be all right. We can make this work. And so it was her. And then, Tommy really being the guy who was like, hey man, let's do this podcast. I think this thing can work, to drive that. I really credit both of them for kind of helping me through that. But going through that whole time, it's uncertain, because we thought maybe we'll get a sponsor. Maybe we'll get one sponsor. That'd be kind of cool. And now we have like some really good sponsors that support us really well on the show. And that helps us pay our bills. We have opportunities to do stuff with Hamilton Road Productions. We have stuff, opportunities to do stuff for other events, like the Legends Championship. Tommy will be doing Wadapalooza. Like it's great. Tommy does the stuff with Morning Chocolate, but there was definitely a time of uncertainty there where it's like, I don't know if this is going to work. Like, am I going to have to go do something else? Am I going to have to find a way to get involved in some other broadcasting avenues? And I was looking, and it was really hard during the pandemic because no one was doing anything. There was an uncertainty there that I had to deal with, but having good people around me, being able to work with Tommy on a regular basis, and then having my wife being able to, supporting me, meant a lot and helped me get through that. And it eventually worked out. And we were all very fortunate that things worked out the way they did in 2020. And I think that slowly but surely we are moving in the right direction as far as the sport is concerned.
I appreciate you sharing that vulnerability. I think it was a tough time for everybody. And then, all of a sudden we saw Greg Glassman sold, and we see the growth of Eric Roza and him coming in from the tech space, and all of this new perked eyebrows, everybody excited with this new energy and enthusiasm. And we saw Matt Frazier kind of move on, and we're seeing the growth and development of Justin Mederios and some of these younger athletes like Haley Adams, Mal O'Brien, Emma Carey. And all of a sudden there's this new flavor, this new excitement. And, what was that kind of like for you guys? And what are your thoughts on the direction of the sport of CrossFit?
I remember getting the email or seeing the post, it was one of the two, that Greg was selling, and I was floored. I was in my kitchen. I was like making breakfast, and I couldn't believe it. I immediately, called Tommy, and I was like, are you seeing this? And he's like, yeah. I go, okay, this is incredible. I never thought this would happen. And the more, there was some skepticism at first, because it's like, okay, who has this much money to buy this thing, and what do they want to do with it? And I think the biggest fear was, we're going to get someone from outside who just looks at this as an opportunity to make some money, doesn't really care about the community, doesn't really care about the ethos that community has, and just wants to make a quick buck and turn this thing into, 24-hour fitness or something like that. And the more that you learned about Eric, the fact that he was from inside the community, that he ran a gym, that he was a fan of the games, and then it was like, oh wow, this might be best case scenario. This is probably best case scenario, because we have someone who gets it. And then getting a chance to hear him speak, getting a chance to talk to him, it was clear that I think his heart is in the right place. Now, look, he does need to run this like a business. They do need to make money. No one's going to, I'm not going to object to that. And I think they have done a very good job of giving affiliates tools and not rules. So not being like, okay, you got to sell this at your gym. You have to have this type of equipment. You have to have this type of layout. Your coaches need to wear this, kind of attire. Your gyms need to be laid out like this. These are the hours where you can operate. These are the only kind of things you can teach. Like, that hasn't happened. But they have come up with resources that are available to the affiliates if they want them, to help them be successful. And that was the thing that Tommy and I would hear a lot when we would talk to people who were just affiliate owners. It's like, I don't know what my, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a year is going towards. What help am I getting? And now I think that there is value in being affiliated, because you do get access to all these tools. And, it was very encouraging from that standpoint. Like, they wanted to kind of clean that thing up. And then it was also encouraging to hear that Eric was a fan of the games, wanted to bring that back. I remember talking to him in Morgan Hill when they had the games here in Northern California in 2020 because of COVID. He sat down I was eating lunch with Bill and Chase, and he sat down with us. He's like, oh, this is great to be back, and hopefully we're going to have more opportunities for you guys to do some stuff. And, Greg never did that in the, 9 years that I worked under him, or 8 years. He never said that to any of us. He never came by the games and took an interest in what we were doing. Like, that was never his thing. And to have the owner of the company take that interest and hear that from him, I was like, wow, okay, maybe this is going to be okay. And I think that unfortunately COVID threw a giant wrench into their plans of growing this thing back. The way I sort of likened the 2021 season is it's like the beta version of a video game. You got some samples of what this is going to be all about. We got some live semifinals. We got a live thing at the games. We got some cool media coverage around it. We didn't get everything I think they wanted to do. If we had 10 live semifinals, that would have been awesome. But we didn't. So I think that has kept them from really getting this thing back to where they want it to go as quickly as they wanted it. But the signs are there. They are going to do more media next year. They did that cool series with Miles to Madison that I thought was fantastic that they did after I think they released it right at the beginning of the games and then gave people like a weekly episode. I thought that stuff was great. I got to be kind of peripherally involved in that. I think things are moving in the right direction. I think Eric's heart is in the right place. I think he's assembled a good team of people around him. And I think they're serious about, not only solidifying the sport side of it, but also solidifying the business side and the affiliate side of it. And I think that has taken priority over the sports side, just because I think that was really in some disarray after everything that happened with Greg. The games department was still pretty much intact with guys like Justin Berg and Dave Castro and their supporting team. That was still pretty much there. But I think it's going to I think it's going to grow. I think it's going to get bigger, and I think it's going to be better. And they're sort of learning as they go. But they definitely want it to work. I am convinced of that. So hopefully they're able to get everything accomplished that they want to get accomplished in the near future.
That's really cool. I love the line, giving affiliates tools and not rules. I think that's a really healthy way.
Well, I think that's that's like their official
line
line too.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. What are your thoughts on kind of the landscape of the sport? I think for many years, we saw open regionals games. Mm-hmm. Now we're seeing a little bit less value associated with the open in the sense of it doesn't have as much meaning in the competitive landscape, but it's amazing for contribution and participation, which I think is very important to note. But now we're seeing the open quarterfinals, semifinals games. What do you think about that? And then what do you foresee with regards to some of the changes in 2022?
I like what they've done with the season. I think when Eric took over and they were going to try to get, there was clear that things were going to change. I think the most important thing to accomplish, whatever that structure was, is that you needed a clear progression throughout the season. You needed everyone plays, fewer people play, championship. It needed to mirror a season structure that people are familiar with other sports, be it, soccer or baseball or football or basketball or hockey, whatever it is. They all have that same sort of everyone plays, fewer people were playing, championship. And that was lacking in 19 and 20. It was just really hard to follow. So 2021, I love that they went to a 3-week open. I think that made it a lot more manageable for affiliates and for people to really commit to, because 3 weeks, you can do 3 weeks. And then I love the fact that they added the quarterfinals, because to me, that's like where regionals gave people who were not quite ready for the games, but gave people a chance to say, okay, I'm going to go to my regional and I'm going to probably be in the first heat, but I'm going to really get a taste of what I need to do in order to be competitive and have a chance of even moving on to the games. And I think that's what quarterfinals have done. They allow a group of people who are maybe aspiring to be more competitive a chance to get a taste of it and be like, okay, you want to do this? Here's what it's going to have to take. Here's what you're going to have to do. These are the times that you're going to have to beat from some of the top athletes in the world if you even want to have a chance. So I love what they've done with that, giving more people opportunities to compete throughout the season. I like the semifinals. I like having live in-person events that feed into the games. I wish that they were all had the same programming, because I love the sort of clean layout of the season as you get to the end, that you can say, all right, everybody did the same test, everybody answered the same questions, and this person is unquestionably the fittest person on earth. With that being said, I do think the semifinals did a great job of programming and making sure that you did get the right people to the games. I love that they have added that last chance qualifier, because that's really cool. That's a little bit of a buffer for people who might, let's say you show up to your semifinal and you're injured, or maybe you bomb an event, or you have a couple hiccups. It does give those athletes who, maybe if that hadn't happened, that I'm right in contention, it gives them another chance. It being online is, I understand why they have to do it that way, because it's so hard to bring people from around the world to one one location to have a last chance qualifier in-person competition. You're basically running another games at that point. But I think what you're gonna see is the season structure basically stay the same. My hope is that as they get more participation in the Open, maybe we get more semifinal events. But I think the next big step for the media coverage side of it is that if you think back to like 2018, the final year of regionals, and even the couple years before that, during those regional weekends when you had multiple events going on, you could go to games.crossfit.com and you could watch the studio show, and they would wrap, we'd talk about, hey, this coverage is going on over here. And we would wrap things up with, all right, here's what's going on in the Atlantic. Let's take you out to the West now. Here's what's going there. And it was like a one central hub for everything you needed. It's like if you watch a Sunday football game or Sunday football, you get the same thing. You get the studio show, you get highlights from everything going on. My hope is that they will get back to that, because I think having these events exist in a vacuum in their own, without kind of tying them together, people are missing out on a little bit. I hope that there are more live broadcasts of those events. I think we only had 4 or 5 that were broadcast this year. And again, a lot of them were online. So we had to deal with that with COVID. But if we can get back to that, I think that's sort of the next big step. And then we really start humming like we were in 2018.
Yeah, I definitely would be really excited to have just a one-stop shop rather than having to seek the information from so many different platforms. With people outside of the CrossFit space that are just kind of observing and hear the term CrossFit and assume that all affiliates are the same and are trying to understand this continuum of, wellness, health, fitness, performance, the sport of CrossFit, in life and in career development, we're always looking for progression or what's next. We kind of talked about that with your broadcasting career. I think people also kind of look at it as kind of black and white that way with regards to their development in fitness. And I think Eric Roza is doing a great job of helping integrate some of the CrossFit health stuff that Greg Glassman started. Julie Fouché and SteadyMD kind of stepped in to kind of help create some education and some awareness around that as well. What are your thoughts on kind of that landscape? And, I think it's been a little bit of a challenge for CrossFit in general to help create education around like, hey, not all CrossFit affiliates are the same. Not all programming is the same. It's all case dependent on your goals. It's not necessarily that, Sean Woodland's goals are the same as Bryce Smith's goals. And, how do we kind of create more education around that so that people can customize their approach to this health, wellness, fitness, performance development?
I think that's a really good question. And I don't know if there's like one right answer to that. I would like to see CrossFit make an attempt to get outside their bubble. And I think what I mean by that is that we usually spend the majority of our time speaking to people who are already involved. Whether that's through Eric's town halls, whether it's through the media that we produce, whether it's through what happens at the affiliate. My wish is that they would they need to get outside that group. They need to start talking to the people who don't know about CrossFit, who haven't been inside an affiliate, who don't know what functional fitness is, who don't know what the experience is like inside an affiliate. Now, how you do that, that's where the rubber meets the road. So I don't know if it's like going on national talk shows and addressing things. I don't know if it's doing like more advertising. I think the games help a little bit with that because they are the most visible thing. You talk to a lot of people say, oh yeah, I saw that on ESPN. And I think that they can use the games and that broadcast as a vehicle to get those messages out. And I think they've done that in the past, and I think they will continue to do that. But I think another layer of it is too, answering these critics. When Jillian Michaels says that stuff that went viral, that upset so many people, publicly address that. Invite her to an L1, do a video on it. And if she declines, then okay, she declines. But you need to do I think they need to do a better job of pushing back on that stuff in a very public manner, and not in a threatening manner, but in like, okay, we understand that you said that. Why don't you come learn? We're willing, we're more than willing to help you with that. And I think it's just finding ways to get outside the bubble, whether it's in, magazines or television programs or podcasts, but really doing a better job of letting the everyday person know about the affiliate experience, about how CrossFit is scalable, about how You don't have to be some super fit Spartan to walk inside of a gym. Even if you do have some limitations, you can still train, you can still work out, you can still improve your health, because most of the time we're just telling each other that. So I think that's the biggest thing for them. Find a way to get outside that bubble. And I think Eric is serious about that. I think they have like a director of marketing now. They're looking at this, and it's going to be a slow process, but my hope is that you'll start to see that develop more here in the coming months as we get into 2022.
I would love to see that. I think it'll really help with regards to the education within the fitness industry, because at the end of the day, movement is medicine. Mm-hmm. And I think creating awareness around connection, community, movement, even as simple as walking. I'm a huge believer that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And I think sometimes people will just Google the term CrossFit, and there's so much complexity and fear. And as you mentioned, like a Spartan-like figure, where people are intimidated to even begin. And I think creating a better narrative around aiming low, trying to have fun within the process of development will ultimately lead to, a better health conscious world that we're very fortunate to be a part of.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're 100% right on that. Like, they just get the message out. And I don't know, there's a million different ways you can do it, but just find a way to get outside the bubble.
Yeah, for sure. As we kind of wrap things up, man, I want to throw you on the hot seat real quick.
Okay.
As we're entering the 2022 season, we're getting ready to have Wadapalooza here in early January. We just finished up the Dubai Fitness Classic, and then we'll find our way into the Open before we know it.
Yeah.
What are your early season predictions? Top 3 on the women's side, top 3
really
on the men's side.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've got Mr. Sean Woodland on the hot seat.
Yeah.
Tommy Marquez breathing over his shoulder. Top 3 men, top 3 women. What you got, man?
Okay, I think so. I'll start with the women because that's going to be a little harder. I think Tia's going to win. If she enters, she's going to win. She's by far the best. I don't see anybody beating her. Now, behind her, that's where it gets interesting. Let's see. I'll take top 3. Let's see, top 3 for 2022. I'll take Tia Toomey. I want to say Laura Horvath will be in there someplace. I've been super impressed with her with what she's been able to do. Yes, she has a weakness, but it is very narrow. It is a very specific weakness. And she had a hell of a performance at this last game. Like, take away what Tia did, and then the fact that Annie had such an incredible comeback. That was an amazing story that I don't think we talk enough about. So I'll put Horvath in there again. I think she might be the heir apparent. Then I am really intrigued by Gabriella Magawa and the growth that she has shown. And I think Haley Adams has a chance as well to possibly wind up in top 3. I'd definitely be keeping an eye on the likes of Mal O'Brien and Emma Carey, Sarah Sigma's daughter with her comeback. But I'll go out on a limb for my third, and I'll say Magawa on the women's side. So those are my 3. I'll take.
No Katrin in that conversation.
I don't.
For you?
So as far as top 3, I don't know. I mean, top 7, sure. Top 6, yes. I don't know. I don't. That's a good question. She might be an outlier, depending on who knows what her training regimen is going to look like and how she gets situated with everything. She always seems to be in the mix. So would it shock me? No. But I'll stick with those 3 for now. Then on the men's side, I think Mederios has it. He's got to be the favorite. I think Vellner will be in the top 3, and I'm going to throw Ricky Garrard out there because I think that he is a talented athlete who has the right guy in his corner in Justin Kotler, seems to be doing things the right way, looked impressive in a couple of events in Dubai as he gets back to competitive shape. And I'm really, really interested to see what he's going to do. I think he could wind up in the top 3. And then I think outside of that, maybe you look at, Fikowski. You have to consider Bjorn Carl Gudmundsson because he's always up there as well. Been super impressed with him throughout his career. And then, you know what? I'll throw this guy out there too, because I think that he's poised to make a big move, and that's Guy Majeros. I think that he will have I think he's going to have his best season. He made the right choice too by getting involved with Mayhem. Like, there's no one goes to Mayhem and gets worse. That just doesn't happen. Yeah. He's that kid is incredible, and I think he has a ton of potential. He just needs to really kind of get better at the endurance side of things. But he is around the right crew. So I'll go with Mederios, Vellner, and Gerard as my top 3.
So awesome, man. We could do an entire episode on that where I just kind of pick your brain and play devil's advocate.
Way too early predictions on that one. Don't hold me to that.
I also think it's cool how you mentioned going to Mayhem. We talk about, the Invictus crew. We talk about some of the other different like training camps around the country. Mm-hmm. And what seems to be the magic elixir is training environment. Just like you mentioned with regards to your development and the people that you've been very fortunate to be around, you're a product of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I think that's a great takeaway for people as they kind of transition, concluding the end of 2021, heading into 2022, self-reflect on, some of the people and the environment that you're spending time in, and that can enable you to make the rest of your life the best of your life.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our CrossFit community, my man?
No, I just thank you so much for having me. I hope everybody has a safe and happy new year. And along those lines of people you're around, there's a guy by the name of Scott Galloway who's a professor at NYU, and I love him. I listen to him all the time, and he talks about being successful in your 20s and in your early life. It's like your goal and your job at that age is to just always look to be improving your peer group and look to be getting yourself around people that are better than you and that are going to make you better. And if you do that, I think you're going to be just fine. I think, like you said, environment has a lot to do with it. Try to get around people that are going to teach you something, whether it's, if you have to knock on doors or make phone calls or send emails to do it, keep reaching out to people, because eventually someone's going to give you an opportunity. When you get an opportunity, take it. Regardless of what it is, take it. And even if it's something you don't want to do, you're going to impress people by doing jobs you don't want to do well, that rather than doing jobs that you do want to do well. And that's, I think, kind of the key to getting onto people's radar.
I love that, man. Well, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Where can people find you?
Find me on Instagram, Woodland53. I'm on Facebook, also on Twitter. Don't do a lot on Twitter. That's more like I just sort of listen on Twitter. And then at Talking Elite Fitness is our Instagram page, and then we have talkingelitefitness.com. We also have a Patreon page, Talking Elite Fitness, or patreon.com/Talking Elite Fitness. So, and then you can listen to the podcast as well. I think we got some cool stuff cooking for 2022.
Very cool, man. Well, I appreciate you spending some time with me today and sharing so many great nuggets with our community. For those of you listening, if you enjoyed my conversation with Sean Woodland, please rate, review, subscribe on all podcast platforms. Until next time, my man. And as always, guys, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Take care. Bye-bye.